This might sound like a ridiculous question, but imagining Ayanokoji as a woman surprisingly open a lot of interesting possibility. For starter, even if she's still become a seatmate with Horikita, Ayanokoji most likely wouldn't become closer with Sudo and the others, but she will join either Kushida's or Karizawa's group. It's still possible for her to become a loner, but Ayanokoji is not someone who firmly rejects social interaction, so it make more sense for her to become part of a girls' group. Depending on how pretty or how big her breasts will be, female Ayanokoji will become the center of attention as long as she doesn't avoid people just like Sakura. If male Ayanokoji is always thinking about how to make friends and live a proper life, female Ayanokoji will most likely spend most of her monologue on how to choose pretty clothes or how to answer group chats properly, and that alone will make Classroom Elite way different than the one we knew. However, before we talk about the story, the choice to write Ayanokoji as a woman will change a lot of aspects of Classroom of the Elite behind the scenes. If Ayanokoji was a woman, Horikita would most likely be written as a man to balance the gender, unless they decide to make this series a girls-to-girls love story. Most female characters will also have their gender reversed, and Classroom Elite will become a reverse harem story that will target a female audience instead of male. Looking at the fact that most popular series from Japan are dominated by regular harem, I don't think reverse harem Classroom Elite will become as popular as the original. But as long as the psychological and mind games aspect of Classroom Elite stays intact, it will keep at least 10% of its original popularity. Back to the story, the way Ayanokoji is written as a female will create a small difference, but will eventually become a butterfly effect that greatly changes how the story progresses. For example, since Ayanokoji wouldn't become close with Sudo and the others, Horikita wouldn't ask her to arrange the study group, but for the sake of the story, let's just say it will keep happening with some other method. The other part will most likely be the same. Chabashiro will still show Horikita Ayanokoji's 50 score, and Ayanokoji will eventually help Sudo from getting expelled. But since Ayanokoji is a woman, gathering in her room most likely wouldn't happen, since it would sound really creepy if Yamochi had a key to enter a girl's room. They probably will gather in someone else's room, but the scene where Kushida blackmails Ayanokoji will need some adjustment. If Ayanokoji is a woman, it will only be considered a small prank if Ayanokoji's fingerprint is found on Kushida's breast. There will be some debate, but the impact is clearly inferior if Ayanokoji's gender got reversed, so the blackmail accident probably wouldn't happen unless Kushida knew about Ayanokoji's OnlyFans account. I don't think there is another method Kushida could use to blackmail Ayanokoji on the spot, so Ayanokoji will immediately become the target of Kushida's evil attention. Just having Kushida continuously watching her back is already enough to change female Ayanokoji's school life. Maybe Kushida will spread rumors about her, or even create some way to bully her to make Ayanokoji withdraw from school, and Ayanokoji will need to bring that trouble to the second volume. Depend on how many friends Ayanokoji has made, maybe she will not have time to accompany Horikita in Sudo's trial. However, it will be easier to get close to Sakura, but the side effect will be Ichinose will need to ask someone else to pretend to be her boyfriend. If Ichinose ends up with some troublesome fake boyfriend, it will affect the cooperation between her and Horikita, but it could easily solved if Horikita taking Ichinose's role, just like what they did in the anime. For the overall story, there is not much that will change from volume to even if Ayanokoji were a woman. Ayanokoji and Manabu's relationship might have some adjustments to fit their gender restriction, especially because I don't think Manabu will try to slam Ayanokoji into the wall like a cliché romance plot, but Sakura's rescue and Sudo's trial are not going to be affected by gender. However, Ayanokoji will definitely experience some change in her daily life, especially when they are close to summer break. Since her mother was a hostess, it's only natural if female Ayanokoji would look stunning in her teenage days, so she will definitely attract some attention from the boys. Social gatherings, exchanging numbers, and finally some man from the other classes or even a senior calling her will be the thing I anticipate the most. All of it could be avoided if she chose to become a loner like Horikita, but it would still be unavoidable if one or two horny boys like Yamochi would try to hit on her. Female Ayanokoji's daily life will be so different compared to male Ayanokoji, and it's worth noting whether her emotional growth will be faster compared to her male version or not, because biologically women tend to develop their emotions more than men. We probably would see Ayanokoji interested in the opposite sex sooner, or wanting to know how it feels to love someone, but the question is, who's going to be her love interest? If we only look at the male characters, Hirata is probably the best choice available. But Hirata as a character doesn't really offer a lot, especially since he has already been in a relationship with Karizawa ever since Volume 1. However, it will be interesting if his and Karizawa's characters get reversed, and Hirata becomes the bullied boy who seeks protection behind Karizawa. If their roles reversed, Volume 4 will be no different compared to what we know, but with Hirata as the main character. That kind of change will make female Ayanokoji some kind of tomboy girl with Hirata as the femboy, but that somehow fits even their original personalities. However, if everything is still the same with the original, maybe Ryuen will fit better as Ayanokoji's love interest. Ryuen has the tendency toward a strong and arrogant woman, so getting beaten by Ayanokoji could truly trigger his feelings. However, that will leave Kei in a really confusing position. She will be saved by Ayanokoji in Volume 4, and saved again from Ryuen in Volume 7, but since they are both women, romance between them will be quite complicated to explain. Maybe they will simply become best friends, but no one will complain if both of them end up turning that way. If that is really the case, the relationship between Ayanokoji, Ryuen, and Kei will become really awkward, but that is not something new if we see what currently happens between Ichinose, Karizawa, Horikita, and Ayanokoji. There are only a few decent male characters in this series, so obviously female Ayanokoji's harem wouldn't be as big as the original. But it will be interesting to see if someone like Manabu or Nagumo would have a more explicit relationship with Ayanokoji, or maybe even the great Koenji himself will end up falling in love with Ayanokoji. The universe where Ayanokoji is a woman sounds like a perfect world to develop more male characters that were somehow neglected in the original timeline. Characters like Nagumo, Kiriyama, or even Yagami could have more chance to shine if only Ayanokoji were a woman, but that will only make the other female characters lose their screen time. Anyway, as for the plot itself, it's hard to think there will be some big change even if Ayanokoji is a woman. Even if she might be a bit weaker physically, there is still no one who would be able to match her. Chabashiro would still blackmail her, and her father will still send Tsukishiro and the White Room students to expel her. If there is some notable change, that will be Ichinose's development in the later half of the second year arc, because if she didn't swing that way for Ayanokoji, her famous Yandere mode would never exist on this very earth. The plot wouldn't change, but Ayanokoji and her surroundings will be greatly different than the ones we know. Her circle of friends and maybe her boyfriends will give a very different feeling in each scene, but that will be just a similar story with different characters. Ayanokoji's romance story is part of this series, but it is undeniably not the main focus, especially now that we are entering the last uninhabited island exam. Imagining Ayanokoji as a woman is just a fun way to explore more slice-of-life stories, but once again, it wouldn't change much of the plot in the grand scheme.